This boarding pass looks fake. The word fake hung in the air, attaching itself to Zara, the black woman, in the minds of nearby passengers. Suspicion spread like contagion. Step aside, ma'am, the airline staff, Brenda, directed. Is there a problem with my ticket? Zara asked, her voice level. No defensive tone, no raised volume. We need to verify this. Step aside, please. Brenda's tone suggested she'd found contraband rather than a valid first-class boarding pass. She made a show of typing into her computer, glancing occasionally at Zara with poorly disguised skepticism. Soon, Captain Victoria Westbrook entered and slapped Zara hard across the face, the impact echoing through the suddenly silent cabin. Would you like to know what caused the slap that ended careers and exposed a system that had been hiding in plain sight? This story reveals the best karma that happens when a woman who was assumed to be nothing and slapped because of her skin color stood up and revealed who she really was. If you stand against injustice and prejudice, comment justice for Zara in the comments and click on the subscribe button to enjoy more of these stories. This was how it all started. Commander Zara Jackson. Every morning for 20 years, her alarm had jolted her awake at 4:30 a.m. This morning was no different. Except today, she wasn't reaching for her uniform. One day without the badge, she told herself, sliding open her closet door. After decades of representing her department, today she'd travel as herself, just another passenger heading to Chicago for the National Police Chiefs Conference. Her fingers hesitated between outfits before settling on comfortable clothes. No one needs to know who I am today, she thought, checking her travel app. The notification had surprised her yesterday. Congratulations, your first-class ticket is ready. Zara smiled, tucking her police chief's badge into an inner pocket of her carry-on. Won't need this today, she whispered, not knowing how wrong she was. Across town, in the gleaming pilot's briefing room of Atlantic Airways, Captain Victoria Westbrook commanded attention. We're seeing a disturbing trend in passenger demographics, she remarked to flight attendant Melissa Parker, her voice just low enough for privacy. The airline is letting just anyone into first class these days. Melissa nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Don't worry, Captain. I know exactly how to handle them when they try to sit where they don't belong. Victoria straightened her already perfect uniform. That's why I requested you for first class, Melissa. You understand our clientele. The standards we maintain aren't just about service. They're about preserving a certain atmosphere. Their laughter carried across the room as diverse crew members exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. But on this particular Tuesday morning, on Flight 1143 to Chicago, the ending would be different. The terminal at Newark International bustled with morning travelers, a sea of humanity rushing to destinations unknown. For most, it was just another Tuesday. For Zara Jackson, it was about to become the most documented example of racial profiling in aviation history. At the airport, Zara noticed a Hispanic family, mother, father, 3 young children, struggling with the airport directory. Confusion etched across their faces as they tried to decipher gate numbers in their limited English. Without hesitation, Zara approached them and offered help in fluent Spanish, a skill she had developed during her community policing years. The family's relief was immediate as she translated gate information and pointed them toward their destination. The mother grasped Zara's hand in gratitude. For a moment, Zara remembered why she had entered public service 2 decades ago, to help people navigate systems not designed with them in mind. This simple act of kindness caught Captain Victoria Westbrook's eye as she strode through the terminal, pilot's cap tucked under her arm, authority radiating from her pressed uniform. She paused, observing the interaction with narrowing eyes. When you're finished, Victoria called out, not even waiting for Zara to turn around. Clean up that spill near the lounge. It's been sitting there for 20 minutes. Her voice carried the unquestioned expectation of immediate compliance. Zara straightened, recognition dawning. I'm a passenger, she explained calmly. Not an airport employee. No anger in her voice. No indignation. Just a simple correction of fact. Victoria's expression didn't change. No embarrassment. No apology. Instead, Her lip curled slightly. "You all look the same in this terminal," she muttered loud enough to be heard before continuing her privileged path through the concourse. The words hung in the air like smoke. The Hispanic father looked at Zara with concern, understanding crossing cultural barriers. He'd heard such comments before, perhaps directed at him. But Zara just took a deep breath. 20 years in law enforcement had taught her which battles to fight. This one, she decided, wasn't worth it. Not yet. 15 minutes later, Zara approached the security checkpoint. Business travelers removed laptops with practiced efficiency. Zara's carry-on contained nothing unusual. Clothes for 3 days, toiletries, conference materials, a small gift for her daughter. The scanner showed no threats. Green light, all clear. And yet, "Step aside, ma'am," the TSA agent directed, a blue-gloved hand already reaching for her bag. Random screening. His name tag read Hoffman. His eyes never quite met hers. Random. The word hung in the air as 3 white businessmen walked through without a second glance. Random as an elderly white couple was waved forward with smiles. Random as a white teenager with a backpack full of electronics passed without question. Random as a stream of non-black passengers flowed through the checkpoint unimpeded. The statistical improbability of such randomness wasn't lost on Zara. Agent Hoffman's hands were unnecessarily rough as they rummaged through Zara's meticulously packed belongings. Items carefully arranged now jumbled without care. "What's this hard object?" he demanded, voice deliberately loud enough for others to hear, creating a spectacle of suspicion. "Just my travel toiletries case," Zara responded evenly, maintaining the composure that had carried her through countless high-pressure situations. The transparent case clearly showed a toothbrush, facial cleanser, moisturizer, ordinary items carried by millions of travelers daily. From the expedited security line, the one Zara's frequent flyer status should have granted her access to. Captain Westbrook watched with smug satisfaction. "Security knows who to check," she commented to another pilot beside her, not bothering to lower her voice. The other pilot smiled but remained silent. Complicity through inaction. After finding nothing suspicious, Agent Hoffman said, "You're free to go, ma'am," hastily repacking her bag, avoiding eye contact. No apology, no acknowledgement of the unnecessary delay or invasive search, just sudden, uncomfortable efficiency born of self-preservation rather than respect. But the damage was done. Captain Westbrook had noted Zara's face with new interest, following her movement through the terminal with predatory focus. Something about this passenger bothered her. Whatever the reason, Zara had become a target. The pattern continued at Gate 37, where Premium Airways Flight 1143 to Chicago prepared for boarding. The electronic board showed on-time departure. First-class passengers gathered near the priority lane, their status marked by subtle signifiers. Premium luggage, tailored clothing, the casual confidence of those accustomed to preferential treatment. Zara approached the first-class line, boarding pass ready. The gate agent, Brenda Williams, wearing the same silver wings pin that adorned flight attendant Melissa Parker's uniform, looked up. Her eyes flicked momentarily to Captain Westbrook, who stood nearby pretending to review flight papers. A silent communication passed between them, imperceptible to most, but obvious to Zara, who had spent her career reading such subtle signals. "Economy boarding isn't for another 45 minutes, Brenda announced loudly, ensuring nearby passengers turned to stare. Her voice carried deliberate authority designed to create public embarrassment. Zara placed her boarding pass on the counter without comment. Years of de-escalation training guided her response. Calm, factual, devoid of the emotion Brenda sought to provoke. She understood the game being played, create a reaction, then use that reaction to justify escalation. Brenda examined the pass as though it were written in hieroglyphics, turning it over, holding it up to the light. "This seems unusual," she declared, drawing out the moment, inviting onlookers to join her suspicion. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Zara asked, voice level, no defensive tone, no raised volume, nothing that could be mischaracterized as aggressive or confrontational. that term so often applied to black passengers who merely questioned mistreatment. We need to verify this. Step aside, please. Brenda's tone suggested she'd found contraband rather than a valid first class boarding pass. She made a show of typing into her computer, glancing occasionally at Zara with poorly disguised skepticism. While Zara waited, 5 white passengers approached the same counter. Each received a cursory glance at their documents, a smile, a "have a wonderful flight," no verification, no scrutiny, no delay. The contrast could not have been more stark or more familiar to Zara. From her position near the jet bridge entrance, Captain Westbrook nodded approvingly at Brenda's performance. This choreographed humiliation had an audience of one. The captain, whose approval mattered more to Brenda than professional ethics or basic human decency. The orchestration became more obvious when Brenda summoned her supervisor, her voice pitched to Carrie. "I think we have a fraudulent boarding pass." The word fraudulent hung in the air, attaching itself to Zara in the minds of nearby passengers. Suspicion spread like contagion. The supervisor, Michael Chen, 15 years with the airline, approached with the wariness of someone who had seen this scenario before. He reviewed the computer system with practiced efficiency, fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. "The ticket is valid," he confirmed, turning the screen to show Brenda. "First class seat 2A, purchased 3 weeks ago. The passenger is a platinum member." Brenda's disappointment was visible. "Are you sure? It doesn't seem right." The implication was clear. Some passengers didn't belong in first class, regardless of their ticket status. That's when Captain Westbrook inserted herself directly into the situation, striding over with manufactured concern. "Is there an issue with boarding?" she asked, as though she hadn't been monitoring the situation from the beginning. Her captain's uniform carried weight, the ultimate authority on this aircraft. Her word nearly law while in command. "This woman has what appears to be a first-class ticket," Brenda explained, her emphasis revealing her skepticism. She said "this woman" rather than "this passenger," a subtle dehumanization that didn't go unnoticed by those familiar with discriminatory language. Captain Westbrook took the boarding pass from Michael's hand without asking. "How exactly did you obtain this?" she demanded of Zara. "These are expensive." The question itself revealed the assumption that Zara couldn't possibly afford such luxury, that her presence in first class required explanation, that she must justify her right to occupy the space. "I bought it with my money," Zara replied, adding pointedly, "Not that it's relevant." Her tone remained professional, but the additional comment revealed the first crack in her patient facade. "Well, we need to verify your payment method," Captain Westbrook insisted. "Fraud is common." She emphasized the word fraud, ensuring nearby passengers associated it with Zara. "Fraud is common, but the verification only seemed necessary for some passengers, didn't it? The selective enforcement, the disparate treatment, the pattern so clear it might as well be painted in neon lights." Michael shifted uncomfortably, professionalism warring with self-preservation. Working for an airline meant respecting the captain's authority, but his training also included non-discrimination policies. "Captain, the ticket is confirmed in our system," he said, trying to resolve the situation without direct confrontation. "I'm responsible for flight security," Captain Westbrook responded, the weight of her uniform backing her words. "I want this verified again. Not a request, but a command." Another 10 minutes passed. 10 minutes of deliberate delay. 10 minutes of quiet humiliation as other passengers continued boarding. 10 minutes of Zara standing aside while her right to travel was questioned. Some passengers glanced her way with curiosity or sympathy. Others avoided eye contact, witnessing the discrimination but unwilling to intervene. A call was made to customer service. Zara's account was verified again. Her platinum status confirmed. Every possible verification performed while she stood waiting, dignity intact despite the orchestrated effort to undermine it. Finally cleared to board, Zara walked down the jet bridge, aware of Captain Westbrook following closely behind her. The confrontation wasn't over. It was merely changing venues. The narrow confines of the jet bridge created a perfect stage for the next act. Semi-private, few witnesses. Zara isolated from potential allies. Just before the aircraft door, Captain Westbrook made her move. This bag is oversized, she declared, suddenly grabbing Zara's standard carry-on. The same bag that thousands of passengers brought on board daily without comment. The same bag that had accompanied Zara on 87 flights over the past 3 years without issue. Please don't touch my personal belongings, Zara requested, voice firm but controlled. A reasonable boundary, professionally stated. But Captain Westbrook's authority had been challenged 3 times now. By Zara's polite correction in the terminal, by her valid first-class ticket, and now by her request for basic respect. In the captain's world, such challenges could not stand, especially from someone she deemed inferior. The captain's response was immediate and violent. She yanked the bag with unnecessary force, causing it to spill open, contents scattering across the jet bridge floor. Zara's neatly folded clothes, conference materials, toiletry bag, the snow globe for her daughter now rolling toward the edge of the walkway. "What are you hiding in here?" she demanded, kicking the toiletry bag aside with her polished shoe. The accusation was baseless. The bag had passed security screening, had been verified multiple times. But the humiliation was the point. Power exercised simply because it could be. "Nothing," Zara responded, maintaining her composure even as several passengers pulled out phones to record the escalating situation. "You're being aggressive now," Captain Westbrook claimed, the classic inversion, portraying the calm black woman as threatening while her own actions became increasingly volatile. It was a tactic Zara had seen countless times in her law enforcement career. Aggressors claiming victimhood, authority figures manufacturing threats where none existed. Zara bent to collect her belongings, dignity intact despite the deliberate humiliation. The snow globe had stopped just short of falling. Her conference materials spread across the floor, her private possessions now public spectacle. "I'll be filing a complaint," she said quietly, knowing the words themselves carried little weight in a system designed to protect those with authority. "What would you do if you were discriminated against at the airport? Would you record it or look away, pretending it isn't happening?" Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to enjoy this story more. After navigating the gauntlet of random screening, verification delays, and baggage violation, Zara finally boarded the aircraft. Her shoulders relaxed slightly as she located seat 2A, window seat, first row, the premium position she had legitimately purchased. A small victory after 30 minutes of calculated harassment. She settled into the seat, stowing her now disheveled carry-on beneath the seat in front of her rather than in the overhead bin. A defensive choice, keeping her belongings close after Captain Westbrook's invasive search. The snow globe for her daughter, miraculously unbroken, remained clutched in her hand before she carefully wrapped it in a scarf and placed it in her bag. Around her, the familiar rhythm of pre-flight preparations unfolded. Flight attendant Melissa Parker moved efficiently through the first-class cabin, offering pre-departure beverages to passengers in 1C, 1D, 2B, all white businessmen who received immediate attention, warm smiles, and solicitous inquiries about their comfort. Melissa's eyes slid past Zara as though the seat were empty. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly, a deliberate invisibility imposed by calculated neglect. The contrast was stark and unmistakable to anyone paying attention. The passenger in 2B received his second scotch, while Zara hadn't been acknowledged once. "Excuse me," Zara said as Melissa passed for the fourth time, her voice measured and professional. "Could I have a bottle of water, please?" Melissa continued her path down the aisle without pausing, without turning, without the slightest indication she heard the request. The performance of deafness was flawless. She responded immediately to a question from 3B moments later. Zara watched this choreography of discrimination with the trained eye of someone who had documented countless cases of selective treatment, who got served, who got ignored, who got the benefit of the doubt, who got presumed guilty. The only difference today was that she was experiencing it firsthand rather than reviewing evidence after the fact. 5 minutes passed. Melissa distributed hot towels, skipping seat 2A. took drink orders for the flight. Skipping seat 2A offered magazines. Skipping seat 2A. The message was unmistakable. You are not worthy of service. You do not belong here. Your comfort does not matter. Zara pressed the call button above her seat, the universal signal for requesting flight attendant assistance. Within seconds, Melissa reached up and deactivated it without a word, without even looking at Zara, continuing her preparations as though nothing had happened. The passenger in 2B, a middle-aged white man in an expensive suit, observed this exchange with growing discomfort. "Excuse me," he said to Melissa as she handed him a warm towel. "The woman next to me has asked for water 3 times. Could you please help her?" Melissa's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'll get to her when I have time," she responded, her tone making clear that such time might never arrive. "We're quite busy with departure preparations." The systematic denial of basic service, service that defined the first-class experience, continued with methodical precision. Each denied request, each ignored gesture, each act of erasure contributed to a message. You are unwelcome here. Zara removed her phone and opened the notes application, documenting each incident with timestamps, descriptions, and names. Years of investigative work had taught her the value of contemporaneous notes, precise details recorded in the moment rather than reconstructed later. She didn't know yet how these notes would be used, but 20 years of law enforcement instinct told her to preserve the evidence. Her methodical documentation was interrupted by a familiar figure appearing at the front of the cabin. Captain Victoria Westbrook had entered for what she announced as a routine pre-flight safety check, though in 15 years of frequent flying, Zara had never once seen a captain perform such an inspection of the passenger cabin. This was no routine check. This was the continuation of targeted harassment that began in the terminal. Captain Westbrook's eyes scanned the first-class cabin before locking onto Zara. Her expression hardened, lips pressing into a thin line of disapproval. She approached with deliberate slowness, stopping directly beside seat 2A. "There must be some mistake," she announced loudly, ensuring other passengers could hear. The statement wasn't directed at Zara, but at the cabin generally, as though her presence was a system error rather than a legitimate passenger. "There's no mistake," Zara responded calmly. "This is my assigned seat." She gestured toward the boarding pass still in her hand, evidence of her right to occupy this space. Captain Westbrook's voice rose, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. "People like you don't belong in first class on my aircraft." The statement hung in the air, explicit, undeniable, witnessed by a cabin full of passengers who visibly recoiled at the naked prejudice. Shock rippled through the first-class cabin. A woman in 1B audibly gasped. The businessman in 2B shifted uncomfortably. A couple in row 3 exchanged worried glances. In the age of viral videos and career-ending moments captured on smartphones, such blatant discrimination seemed almost anachronistic. Yet here it was, unfolding in real time, with the captain's authority lending it institutional weight. Zara's expression remained composed, but her question cut to the heart of the matter. "What exactly do you mean by people like me?" The question was a trap, and they both knew it. There was no non-discriminatory answer possible. "You know exactly what I mean," Captain Westbrook responded, doubling down rather than retreating. "You're out of place here." The words carried centuries of history. Who belonged where? Who decided? What happened to those who crossed invisible boundaries? The cabin had gone silent. Even the ambient sounds of boarding seemed to have faded. Every passenger was now witness to an escalating situation where the power dynamic appeared clear: the uniformed captain versus the lone passenger. Recognizing the historical significance of what was unfolding, Zara reached for her phone to document the interaction. Not for a lawsuit, not for compensation, but for accountability, so this moment couldn't be denied later, couldn't be minimized, couldn't be rewritten to blame the victim. Melissa materialized instantly, with a speed never displayed when service was requested. "No recording allowed during safety checks," she declared, positioning herself to block Zara's phone. The coordination between captain and flight attendant revealed their practice dynamic. One created the confrontation while the other enforced arbitrary rules to prevent documentation. But it was too late. Other passengers had begun recording. In seats 1D, 3A, and 4C, smartphones were discreetly capturing what had transformed from casual discrimination to something approaching public spectacle. Captain Westbrook's frustration escalated as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. She pointed her finger directly in Zara's face, close enough that Zara could feel the displacement of air, the physical intrusion of personal space. "You're being disruptive," she accused, voice tightening with anger. The accusation was absurd on its face. Zara hadn't moved from her seat, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't done anything but exist in a space Captain Westbrook believed she shouldn't occupy. "I'm sitting quietly in my assigned seat," Zara responded, still calm, still measured, still professional despite the escalating harassment. Her hands remained visible on the armrests, a habitual position from years of de-escalation training. Nothing that could be misinterpreted as threatening, nothing that could justify further escalation. But Captain Westbrook wasn't interested in de-escalation. "Your tone and body language are aggressive and threatening," she claimed, manufacturing a reality that existed only in her perception. It was a familiar tactic to anyone who had studied or experienced racial profiling. Interpret neutral behavior as threatening when performed by certain bodies. The businessman in seat 2B, who had witnessed the entire interaction from a distance of less than 2 feet, finally intervened. "She hasn't moved or raised her voice," he said, addressing Captain Westbrook directly. "Stay out of this." Captain Westbrook snapped, her authority now openly challenged by a passenger she would typically treat with deference. "She's creating a hostile environment." The irony of the statement was lost on no one present. The only hostility emanated from the captain herself. The atmosphere tensed solely because of her escalating behavior. Zara recognized the dangerous trajectory of the situation. "The only hostility is coming from you and your staff," she stated factually, her voice still calm but direct. The truth of the statement, validated by every witness present, pushed Captain Westbrook past her breaking point. "That's it," she declared, face flushing with anger. "Melissa, call security to remove this passenger." Melissa moved to the cabin intercom with practiced efficiency, the same efficiency notably absent when service was requested. "Security to first class," she announced. "Disruptive passenger." The words echoed through the aircraft, transforming a first-class seat into a crime scene, a paying passenger into a suspected threat. 3 minutes passed in tense silence. Captain Westbrook stood guard as though Zara might attempt escape, though she hadn't moved from her seat. Passengers continued recording discreetly, documenting what many already recognize as a career-ending abuse of authority. 2 airport security officers arrived at the aircraft door, expressions professional but confused. As they scanned the cabin, they saw no disruption, only a composed black woman sitting quietly in 2A while the captain hovered nearby, visibly agitated. "Remove her immediately," Captain Westbrook demanded, gesturing toward Zara. "She's threatened my crew." The accusation was not merely false, but impossible to reconcile with the calm scene before them. The security officers hesitated. "I've done nothing wrong," Zara stated quietly. "This is racial profiling." The words named the reality that had been unfolding in plain sight, the systematic targeting based on appearance rather than behavior. "There she goes, playing the race card," Captain Westbrook exclaimed, voice rising to a near shout. The phrase itself, dismissing documented discrimination as imaginary, revealed more than any witness testimony could about her perspectives and prejudices. The security officers exchanged glances, uncertain how to proceed in what had clearly become a complicated situation. But Zara reached slowly, deliberately toward the inner pocket of her jacket. "Perhaps my identification will clarify," she began, her movement unhurried, telegraphed, non-threatening. But Captain Westbrook's reaction was immediate and shockingly disproportionate. With no warning, she slapped Zara hard across the face, the impact echoing through the suddenly silent cabin. "She's reaching for a weapon," she shouted, the justification following the violence rather than preceding it. Time seemed to suspend in the aftermath of the assault. Passengers frozen in disbelief. Security officers momentarily paralyzed by the unexpected escalation. Melissa's hand covering her mouth in belated recognition that a line had been irrevocably crossed. If you were in Zara's shoes, what would you have done after the slap? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button now. The sting of the impact remained on Zara's cheek as she slowly, deliberately completed the motion interrupted by violence. From her jacket pocket, she produced not a weapon, but a badge. Not just any badge, but one instantly recognizable to anyone in law enforcement. She held it up without speaking, letting the gold shield and identification card speak for themselves. The silence stretched. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3, as recognition dawned across multiple faces simultaneously. The senior security officer broke the silence, voice cracking slightly with disbelief, Chief Jackson of the Metropolitan Police. His posture straightened involuntarily, the instinctive response of a junior officer in the presence of command leadership. The transformation was instantaneous. Captain Victoria Westbrook's face drained of color as the full implications crashed upon her. Her hand, the one that moments ago struck a passenger, began to tremble visibly. The absolute authority she wielded seconds earlier evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of irreversible consequence. The security officer unclipped his radio, all hesitation vanished. His next words delivered with professional clarity. "I need backup and arrest support at Gate 37. Captain Victoria Westbrook is being detained for assaulting Chief Zara Jackson." In a single moment, in a single revelation, the power dynamic that shaped every interaction since the terminal had inverted completely. The woman repeatedly told she didn't belong held more authority than anyone else on the aircraft. The woman dismissed, ignored, and assaulted was the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the jurisdiction. Captain Victoria Westbrook was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her career. Assumptions had consequences, privilege had limits, and justice sometimes arrived wearing casual clothes in Seat 2A. The revelation of Zara Jackson's badge froze time in the first-class cabin of Flight 1143. For 23 seconds, captured on multiple passenger recordings, no one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was the ambient hum of the aircraft's ventilation system and the distant murmur of boarding passengers unaware of the seismic shift occurring in first class. Captain Victoria Westbrook stood backed against the bulkhead wall, her right hand still suspended in the air, the hand that moments ago struck the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the metropolitan area. Her face had drained of color so completely that several passengers later described it as ghostly. 20 years of unchecked authority, of protected privilege, of insulated entitlement, all collapsing in a single moment of irreversible consequence. The senior security officer, Robert Diaz, 15 years with airport security, recovered first. His training overrode his shock as he unholstered handcuffs from his belt with practiced efficiency. "Captain Victoria Westbrook," he announced formally, "you're under arrest for assault." The words penetrated Captain Westbrook's frozen disbelief. "You can't do this," she protested, voice rising with indignation. "I'm the captain." The declaration emerged as though the title itself conferred immunity, as though her uniform created a barrier against accountability that had until this moment proven largely true. Officer Diaz positioned himself behind her, securing the first cuff around her wrist with a metallic click that resonated through the cabin. "You struck a police chief," he stated matter-of-factly, in front of 200 witnesses and at least a dozen cameras. He secured the second cuff, completing the physical manifestation of authority transferred. "Your rank doesn't place you above the law." The reality of her situation began to penetrate Captain Westbrook's shock. She struggled against the restraints, the movement awkward and undignified, so different from her usual carefully choreographed command presence. "This is a mistake." She was reaching. The justification died on her lips as she realized how hollow it sounded, how thoroughly contradicted by witness testimony and video evidence. Flight attendant Melissa Parker emerged from her own paralysis, moving toward the officers with the desperate energy of someone watching their career implode in real time. There must be some misunderstanding, she began, positioning herself between the officers and Captain Westbrook. The captain was just following security protocols. The second security officer, Sarah Lynn, more recently hired but equally professional, stepped forward. "Step back," she warned, her tone leaving no room for negotiation, "or you'll be arrested for obstruction." Officer Lynn's hand moved to her own handcuffs, making clear this wasn't an idle threat. "We already have multiple witness statements about your coordinated harassment of Chief Jackson." Melissa retreated, self-preservation finally overriding loyalty to her captain. She glanced toward Zara, opening her mouth as if to offer some belated apology or explanation, but thought better of it. The time for words had passed. The time for consequences had arrived. The commotion had drawn attention beyond the first-class cabin. Passengers in economy recorded through the dividing curtain. Flight attendants assigned to the main cabin hovered uncertainly in the galley, whispering among themselves. Word spread through the aircraft with the viral efficiency of shocking news. The captain slapped a passenger. The passenger is a police chief. They're arresting the captain. The airline station manager, Kenneth Williams, 22 years with Atlantic Airways, rushed on board, face flushed with exertion and alarm. He had received 3 emergency alerts simultaneously. Captain being arrested, high-profile passenger assaulted, departure delayed. The confluence of operational, legal, and public relations disasters had propelled him from his office to Gate 37 in record time. "Chief Jackson," he began, approaching Zara with the caution of someone nearing an unexploded ordnance. "I'm mortified." The apology fragmented as he struggled to find words adequate to the situation. What corporate language addressed a chief of police being racially profiled and physically assaulted by airline staff? Zara Jackson had not moved from seat 2A, had not raised her voice, had not displayed the anger that most would consider fully justified under the circumstances. "I want all security footage preserved immediately," she stated, voice professional but firm. Not a request, but a directive from the highest law enforcement authority in the jurisdiction. From the terminal, the gate area, the jet bridge, and the aircraft. Every camera, every angle. She knew from experience how quickly evidence could disappear when powerful institutions faced liability. Kenneth nodded rapidly, already typing directives into his tablet. "Of course, Chief. I've already." His tablet chimed with an incoming video call, interrupting his response. The screen displayed "Incoming CEO Emergency Protocol" in flashing red letters. Within 90 seconds of Captain Westbrook's arrest, the incident had escalated to the highest levels of Atlantic Airways. The corporate machinery that typically insulated frontline staff from consequences had reversed direction, now operating at unprecedented speed to distance the airline from the unfolding catastrophe. Kenneth turned the tablet to display the video conference. Premium Airways CEO Richard Hamilton appeared. Hamilton's expression reflected the gravity appropriate to a $42 billion company facing potential brand annihilation via viral video. "Chief Jackson," Hamilton began, dispensing with corporate pleasantries, "on behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable treatment you've experienced. I assure you that Captain Westbrook's actions represented neither our policies nor our values." The carefully crafted statement, likely vetted by legal even in these hasty circumstances, rang hollow against the evidence already spreading across social media. Captain Westbrook's behavior was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of coordinated harassment involving multiple staff members over an extended period. As if to underscore this reality, Melissa Parker was approached by 2 uniformed airline supervisors who had boarded during Hamilton's statement. "Flight attendant Parker, your employment with Atlantic Airways is terminated effective immediately," the senior supervisor stated, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Please surrender your credentials and exit the aircraft." The swift employment action, normally preceded by investigations, hearings, and union consultations, revealed the airline's desperation to contain the damage. Melissa's face crumpled as 27 witnesses recorded her escort from the aircraft. Her career ended in the same public space where she had participated in Zara's humiliation. Through the still open aircraft door, gate agent Brenda Williams was visible at the boarding podium, being approached by airline security. Her confused expression transformed to shock as her airline ID was removed from around her neck. 3 minutes later, a replacement gate agent took her position. The machinery of damage control accelerated. A replacement captain, summoned from the crew lounge with emergency priority, hurried down the jet bridge, followed by a full replacement cabin crew. The airline's protocol for handling cabin disruptions had been expanded to unprecedented scale, replacing every staff member who had contact with Chief Jackson. Throughout the aircraft, passengers shared their videos with authorities, with each other, and, despite in-flight connectivity not yet being activated, with contacts outside the airport. Modern technology ensured that justice unfolded in public view, live-streamed and shared across platforms, immune to institutional cover-ups or revised narratives. Captain Victoria Westbrook was led through the terminal in handcuffs, the ultimate symbol of authority reversal. Her uniform, once a shield against accountability, now served as a high-contrast backdrop for her restraints, amplifying the visual impact of her downfall. Media already positioned at the airport for an unrelated story pivoted cameras toward this breaking development. The footage would lead evening newscasts across the country. Announcements echoed through the terminal. All Premium Airways staff report for emergency bias training. The public address system transformed internal damage control into public admission, an airline acknowledging systemic issues while desperately trying to contain them. The consequences extended beyond the airport. At Metropolitan Police Headquarters, a holding cell door closed on Captain Victoria Westbrook with the definitive thud of privilege suspended. The stark concrete room contrasted sharply with the command authority of the cockpit she had occupied hours earlier. Her uniform had been exchanged for standard-issued detention clothing, the ultimate equalization. Across town, in a conference room hastily converted for witness interviews, Zara Jackson provided her official statement. Her account unfolded with the precision of someone trained to document incidents, chronological, factual, devoid of emotional characterization, but rich in verifiable detail. Her notes from the aircraft proved invaluable, contemporaneous documentation strengthening an already overwhelming case. In the booking area, Captain Westbrook's mugshot captured a woman unraveling in real time. The shell-shocked expression, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, revealed someone encountering genuine accountability, perhaps for the first time. The photograph would appear on news sites within hours, juxtaposed with images of her professional airline headshot, a visual before and after of consequences realized. Back at the airport, Chief Jackson reviewed passenger testimonies collected by responding officers. What emerged was not merely documentation of today's incidents, but a pattern stretching back through Captain Westbrook's career. A black businessman recalled being questioned about his first-class ticket 3 months earlier. A Middle Eastern doctor described being removed from a flight after Captain Westbrook claimed she was uncomfortable with his presence. A Hispanic flight attendant shared being reassigned from Captain Westbrook's flights after the captain complained about her communication skills, despite her perfect English. The pattern extended beyond a single day, beyond a single target, revealing systematic discrimination operated with institutional protection until today. A representative from the Federal Aviation Administration arrived at police headquarters within 3 hours of the incident, unprecedented speed for a regulatory agency typically deliberate in its processes. Their statement was unequivocal. Captain Westbrook's pilot license is suspended pending investigation. The provisional action, typically reserved for pilots suspected of substance abuse or severe safety violations, reflected the gravity with which the incident was being treated at federal levels. As evening approached, Captain Victoria Westbrook sat alone in a holding cell, awaiting arraignment. Chief Zara Jackson prepared to address a hastily assembled press conference, and across social media platforms, hashtag Flying While Black became the #1 trending topic worldwide, millions of users sharing their own experiences of discrimination in aviation. What happened on Flight 1143 was never just about one slap. It was about who belonged where, who decided, and what happened when unchecked authority met unexpected power. A few days later, inside courtroom 4B, former Captain Victoria Westbrook sat at the defendant's table in a conservative Navy suit that couldn't quite disguise how much weight she'd lost during pretrial detention. Gone was the commanding presence, the reflexive authority, the unquestioned confidence that once radiated from her uniform. In its place sat a woman diminished, not by accountability itself, but by her lifelong assumption she would never face it. Judge Eleanor Michaels, 32 years on the federal bench, known for neither leniency nor excessive harshness, reviewed the file before her with deliberate thoroughness. The courtroom held its collective breath as she looked up, removing her reading glasses in a gesture courtroom regulars recognized as preceding significant statements. The defendant has pled guilty to all charges, Judge Michaels began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hushed space. Based on the overwhelming evidence and the plea agreement reached with prosecutors, this court sentences you to 6 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and perhaps most significantly, a lifetime ban from employment in the aviation industry. Judge Michaels continued, leaning forward slightly for emphasis. This case sends a message that no position of authority places you above the law. The uniform you wore was meant to signify responsibility, not immunity. Your actions betrayed the trust placed in you by your employer, your passengers, and the public. Westbrook kept her gaze fixed on the table before her, nodding almost imperceptibly as the judge detailed the terms of her probation, including mandatory anti-bias training, community service in underserved communities, and permanent surrender of her pilot's license. Across town, in a corporate conference room, 73 floors above the city, the airline's executives signed the final documents on a $40 million class action settlement. The fund would compensate not only the passengers of Flight 1143 who witnessed the discrimination, but hundreds of other travelers who came forward with similar experiences once the case became public. The settlement included non-monetary provisions that would transform industry practices, mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff, revised complaint procedures, transparent tracking of discrimination reports, and perhaps most significantly, the permanent industry blacklisting of gate agent Brenda Williams and 5 other employees whose pattern of discriminatory behavior was revealed during discovery. But justice served was only the beginning. True accountability required systemic change. 6 months after Flight 1143, Chief Zara Jackson stood before a joint task force of transportation executives, regulatory officials, and civil rights leaders. No longer in the casual clothes of that fateful day, she wore the formal uniform of her office, stars on her shoulders reflecting the overhead lights as she outlined implementation strategies for the new federal guidelines. Accountability without systemic change is just theater, she told the assembled leaders, her quiet authority commanding the room without raising her voice. Our goal is not punishment but transformation, creating systems where such incidents become impossible rather than merely punishable. The transformation unfolded across the industry with remarkable speed. Airlines implemented blind passenger processing systems where seat assignments and upgrades were determined exclusively by membership status, spending history, and other objective metrics, removing the subjective judgments that allowed discrimination to flourish. An anonymous reporting system, accessible via QR codes on boarding passes and in-flight materials, created unprecedented transparency. Reports increased by 300% in the first month, not because incidents had increased, but because passengers now believed reporting would lead to action rather than indifference. Perhaps most significantly, security footage from airports, gates, and aircraft was now automatically preserved when complaints were filed, eliminating the convenient technical difficulties that previously allowed evidence to disappear. The measure, originally resisted as costly and logistically challenging, became mandatory after three major airlines discovered their implementation resulted in 70% fewer discrimination claims within 90 days. Behavior changed when accountability became inevitable rather than theoretical. A diverse hiring initiative transformed airline staff demographics, particularly in leadership positions. The industry that once prided itself on a certain look, code for exclusionary hiring practices, now showcased diversity in recruitment materials. What began as reputation management evolved into competitive advantage as diverse leadership correlated with improved customer satisfaction scores and reduced complaint rates. At an aviation academy, Chief Jackson addressed the graduating class, future pilots, flight attendants, air traffic controllers, and support staff who would shape the industry for decades to come. Authority requires accountability, she told them, her words live streamed to aviation programs nationwide. The power you will hold over passengers, over their safety, over their dignity, comes with the responsibility to wield that power equitably. Your uniform is not a shield against consequences, but a visible reminder of your obligation to those you serve. In the audience, several familiar faces appeared, former passengers from Flight 1143 who had been hired as compliance officers throughout the industry. Their first-hand experience with discrimination had been transformed into expertise in prevention, their trauma into purpose. They represented a new generation of aviation professionals for whom diversity was not a corporate buzzword, but an operational imperative. Victoria Westbrook participated in the mandatory anti-bias program that once seemed beneath her consideration. In group sessions, she sat alongside others who had abused positions of authority, police officers who profiled drivers, teachers who punished minority students disproportionately, managers who created hostile work environments. Their shared journey toward understanding began with the hardest step, acknowledging the harm they caused. Westbrook's transformation wasn't immediate or complete. Genuine change rarely is. But she began writing letters to Chief Jackson, to passengers on Flight 1143, to former colleagues of color whose complaints she dismissed or whose careers she hindered. The letters, reviewed by her counselor before sending, revealed painful recognition of patterns she once defended or denied. "I didn't see what I was doing as discrimination," she wrote to Zara. "I saw it as maintaining standards, as exercising judgment, as doing my job. I couldn't recognize the difference between authority and power, that one is granted to serve others while the other exists to elevate oneself. I can't undo what I did, but I can acknowledge it without excuses or justifications." Not all recipients welcomed these communications. Some returned the letters unopened. Others responded with their own accounts of how her actions affected them. A few engaged in ongoing correspondence, recognizing that her journey toward understanding served a larger purpose than either punishment or absolution. Thousands of miles away, in a sunlit classroom at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Zara's daughter began her journey toward becoming a commercial pilot. Inspired not by her mother's ordeal, but by her response to it, the way she transformed individual injustice into institutional change. She represented a new generation entering aviation with both awareness of its problematic history and commitment to its more equitable future. "My mom never told me I couldn't succeed in spaces where people like us weren't welcome," she explained to a documentary crew filming her first solo flight. "She showed me how to transform those spaces instead." Premium Airways, recognizing both legal necessity and marketing opportunity, featured Chief Jackson in their new training materials on bias recognition and intervention. The program, mandated for all employees from baggage handlers to board members, used footage from Flight 1143 alongside expert commentary on how multiple intervention points were missed before the situation escalated to violence. 1 year after Flight 1143, passengers from the flight reunited in a hotel conference room near the airport where their paths first crossed. The gathering, originally conceived as part of a documentary project, evolved into something more profound, a collective reflection on how witnessing discrimination and its consequences changed their understanding and behavior. I used to mind my own business, admitted the businessman who sat in 2B beside Zara. If I saw something uncomfortable happening to someone else, I'd tell myself it wasn't my problem or wasn't my place to intervene. Now I understand that silence is participation. Neutrality serves the oppressor, never the victim. Other passengers shared similar revelations, how they become more attuned to subtle discrimination in their workplaces, more willing to speak up when they observe unequal treatment, more conscious of how systems could perpetuate bias without explicit malice. The incident changed not only those directly involved, but the witnesses who carried its lessons into their own spheres of influence. What began with a slap heard around the world had transformed into a reckoning felt throughout an industry. Not because the incident itself was exceptional. Thousands of travelers experienced similar discrimination daily, but because for once, the consequences matched the offense. For once, power faced accountability. For once, justice wasn't delayed or denied, but delivered in full view of a watching world. The true measure of change wasn't found in legislation or settlements, in training programs or hiring initiatives. It was found in the lived experience of travelers who once approached airports with anxiety, who calculated their appearance and behavior to minimize potential harassment, who accepted indignities as the price of mobility. When authority abused its power, the damage extended far beyond individual incidents to erode trust in entire systems. But when accountability followed abuse, swift, appropriate, transparent, that same trust began to rebuild, not through promises or policies, but through visible evidence that justice applied to everyone, regardless of uniform or title or position. The captain's wings that once shielded Victoria Westbrook from consequences couldn't withstand the weight of the police chief's badge. But the true victory wasn't one authority overwhelming another. It was a system finally working as intended, holding power accountable regardless of its source. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, like, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video. I appreciate your support.